really not sure what was going on with my ear. It definitely inhibited my life in a big way. Nobody explained to me what was going on, but thankfully I didn't believe them. I'm very much back to normal and doing everything that I want to do. And I think that all of these tools are correlated to my improvement.
Anna, welcome to the Treble Health Podcast. Your story today will focus on tinnitus, sound sensitivity, and how you got back to normal after a treatment period with Treble Health. So this is going to focus on you, what worked, what didn't work, and hopefully folks watching who are having a similar experience can learn from your story. Can you tell us where you are right now and then where you were when your symptoms were at their worst, just to compare the possible benefit, the possible treatment effect that can happen with sound sensitivity and tinnitus?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me, by the way. Happy to do this. I think at this point in my life, I'm really kind of emotionally detached from the tinnitus. I feel like I can pretty much go about my life and it's really nothing at this point but a minor annoyance when it comes up and when I recognize it happening. But I think that I really have the coping skills and a better understanding of actually what it is that's going on to be able to just kind of help regulate any anxiety that I used to have around it. I would say about a year ago, actually, it's been almost a year, I think, since I first reached out to Treble Health. But prior to that time, it was really difficult. I was really not sure what was going on with my ear. I was just having a lot of questions around it. And I think that was really creating a sense of anxiety for me. So yeah, there were certain situations where like I wouldn't be able to go out to loud places like loud restaurants or out to like a bar or like definitely not a concert or anything like that. So it definitely inhibited my life in a big way. And I think that at this point, I'm very much back to normal and doing everything that I want to do. And like I said, it's really just kind of an annoyance that I sometimes manage, but all in all, everything is going really well.
We'd love to hear that. So tell us what really worked for you. You tried various things. Tell us a bit about your symptoms, what you were experiencing, how much tinnitus, how much sound sensitivity, and then start to tell us some of the tools that really helped you and worked.
Yeah, so I had something called Tensor Tympani Syndrome, which actually isn't like the typical case of tinnitus that most people, tend to have and tend to talk about. What I had was not a ringing in the ear, but like a sensation of like thumping and a sound that accompanies it, which I later found out through the help of Dr. Sarah was called Tensor Tympani Syndrome. And I think just learning like specifically what that was really impactful for me because I had been to several ENT doctors and basically nobody explained to me what was going on. They basically just said, I had tinnitus. And they also said that there was pretty much nothing you can do about it. You just have to live with it. So you can imagine that wasn't particularly helpful to hear. But thankfully I didn't believe them and I continued to do my own research and that's how I found Treble Health. But to get back to your question about what helped, I think, firstly, just like learning about specifically what it is. And Dr. Sarah really helped me to understand, everyone has these muscles. These muscles contract every time we hear noises. For whatever reason, I'm hearing it and I'm feeling it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's really just actually reflective of like my ear's normal function. So that was, I think, extremely helpful just to hear like there's nothing terribly wrong with you, right? Like I think you're asking yourself like, what is going on? And as I mentioned, doctors didn't really shed too much light on it. And the information I was seeing on the internet was really not helpful or very informative either. So yeah, just learning what it was really helpful. And then I think the other piece that helped so much for me was working with Dr. Sarah to just kind of change my relationship to it. As I mentioned, it was the source of a lot of anxiety because I didn't know what it was. But I think as soon as I kind of understood what it was and had some reassurance that there were some different types of treatments that I could partake in, and also just having kind of that support in Dr. Sarah to reassure me that like everything is actually okay. There's nothing wrong with me. It's really just something that's going on with my ear. So yeah, I think just having that changed relationship to it and removing some of those like negative feelings around it was really impactful for me.
And did you change your reaction to it as well as the sound itself change? Did the sound itself get softer or change in quality? Because when folks hear you describe it, they're thinking, so Anna, did you just get used to it? Did you just tolerate it? Tell us about the physiological or the volume perception changes over time.
Yeah. So, what was interesting about it for me was I think the thumping, the actual tensor tympani syndrome was really like linked hand in hand to the hyperacusis, the sound sensitivity. So, kind of like the peak, like the worst part of the worst time when I was going through this, it was really triggered by like very minute noises, where like it would start off just being like one or two things, like the sound of phones would really like any kind of like artificial noise would really bother me. Running water was like a big thing. And then it got to a point where like even just someone talking to me at like a normal volume, just like a face-to-face conversation, it would kind of set off my tensor tympani. So I wouldn't say that like the volume has necessarily changed of how it sounds to me or how it feels to me, but what has changed is that it's much less reactive to the noises around me, and it's much less sensitive now. So there are still certain noises that are very triggering for some reason, where it just kind of goes off. My ear just doesn't seem to like those noises. But by and large, like they're way fewer and way further between. So I can lead my daily life. I can have a conversation without having like the distraction of something going on in my ear. So I think that's really what changed. And I think there is an element too of like, you don't want to hear like getting used to it because that kind of has a negative connotation. But I do think that, as I said before, just like knowing what it is and just knowing that like, okay, this is just something that happens, it does really, I think, reduce the perception of the intensity or like the volume of it.
For those who want to learn about hyperacusis, sound sensitivity, and its relationship to tinnitus, these are symptoms that are often happening at the same time. And what we typically see is the sound sensitivity can have a faster treatment than the tinnitus. You mentioned Dr. Sarah, and for those who don't know, she's an audiologist on our team at Treble Health. She's one of our specialists that works with sound sensitivities and tinnitus. And if you'd like to have a complimentary telehealth consultation with a member of our team, we'll include a link below so you can speak with an audiologist like me and get some of your questions answered. Anna, back to your story, what would be your advice for someone who's been going through tinnitus and sound sensitivity? Let's imagine they've had it for about 6 months. They've been to local doctors. They didn't get anywhere. They're online. They know they need help, but they're not sure exactly what they should do. What would be your advice for how to get some relief and get some help?
I mean, I think that first and foremost, I think going to the doctor is a good place to start because they can help you rule out any like serious underlying causes for the tinnitus, and just kind of like reassure you that the systems are functioning normally. At least that was like kind of some reassurance I got. But at the same time, going to the doctor was difficult because I heard something that I didn't want to hear, which was that you can't do anything about it. So I guess my advice would be go to the doctor if you feel like you need that reassurance about, like your physical health, but don't, take everything with a grain of salt and don't necessarily believe them if they say that there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You just have to live with it. I think that's a bit dramatic and honestly a little bit irresponsible of them because we do know that there are sound therapy treatments that are effective at this point. So I would say, just like having faith and having confidence that there is information out there, there are resources out there that can help you, and there are experts in this. I think in my research, I was literally just Googling like thumping in ear, like very elementary Google search. But that actually is how I found Treble Health and an article about tensor tympani syndrome. So there, and I was like, oh, well, someone knows what this is. It's not a totally foreign, subject to the audiologist community. So that gave me some confidence. And then I felt more capable from there to be able to, have resources I could go to, have some support in that area. And so ultimately I did reach out to Treble Health to, get a little bit more of that ongoing support beyond just the YouTube videos or the articles that you all provide online.
You had mentioned to me that you feel like you're back to normal and that you're able to do everything that you want to. What are some things that you've done in the past few months that have been very loud where when these symptoms were at their worst, you would be shocked to think that you'd be able to be in those environments again? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, a lot of things. I mean, I remember a year ago actually having to leave early from one of my best friend's birthday parties because it was just too loud. And actually she just had a birthday party this past, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and it was karaoke. And I was able to just be there the whole time. And we even went out dancing after, and it was I mean, and to be fair, like I think Dr. Sarah has also taught me that like there are levels of noise that are unsafe for everyone. It doesn't matter if you have tinnitus or not. Like there are situations where wearing earbuds is appropriate because it is too loud. But, to be able to just like put myself in that situation was huge. And I was able to look back and say like, wow, I can do these things now that I wasn't able to do a year ago.
You said you had symptoms of thumping or hearing sounds like that in your ear. It made me think of the importance of settling and calming the central nervous system. Things like
Hmm.
guided breathing, having exercise, having good sleep. From the research that I've seen in the patients I've worked with, that's highly correlated to settling down that thumping a bit. Did you experiment with any of those? And how did a more holistic approach to your health affect your symptoms?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think that all of those things are very, very well, very tied to each other. During around that time, I was going through a lot of anxiety, not just because of the tensor tympani, but just other factors, other things I had going on in my life at the time. And so a lot of those practices that you mentioned are things that I started implementing then and have really kind of kept a routine of that even, to this day. So, absolutely something that is a non-negotiable is getting a good night's sleep, which I understand can be difficult if you do have tinnitus, but just really prioritizing that. I know that that makes a really profound impact on my mental health. I also did start meditating. I don't do very much, but I do it regularly and consistently. I do just about like 10 or 15 minutes every day. And I do find that that helps me to kind of just like recenter and narrow in again on like what's important and be able to kind of tune out like the noise, metaphorically and physically that I'm hearing. So yeah, I think all those things are really critical. I think that, like I said, the feelings of anxiety around it really amplify all of those negative feelings and can really send, if you're like me, can send you down a spiral of bad thoughts, and it kind of gets blown out of proportion to like what's actually going on. So yeah, I think all those things are really important to stay grounded.
You hired our team, Dr. Sarah, to work with you. For someone who hasn't worked with a professional, or for someone who wants to get those really important nuggets, those tips that you learned just here on this podcast, what were your major takeaways in terms of actionable steps that you got from working one-on-one with a tinnitus and hyperacusis expert?
I think that having, like you said, having actionable steps, having action items is really helpful. Just to have an experience where you feel like somebody has seen this before, knows what's going on. I remember my first meeting with Dr. Sarah. I was a little bit apprehensive. I was a little bit skeptical about, how much Treble Health would be able to help me because all the information out there is about ringing in the ears, and I couldn't find much of anything about the thumping that I was experiencing. And so I was like, yeah, like, I don't know if you've like dealt with this a lot, but I have this like thumping in my ear. And she was like, oh, please, like, I've seen this before. Like, it was just so reassuring to have her say that she like has seen this before and she knows what it is. So yeah, I think just like having that comfort of like, okay, like, there's an expert here that is that kind of knows what's going on, and then being able to just have like something to do about it is really cool. So after months of like not being sure what to do and not really having any tools or instruction, having someone tell you like, hey, here's something that you can do every day, here's 15 minutes of this you can do, here's 6 to 8 hours that we did of the, ambient sound therapy. It's just like, okay, now I have something to do. Now I can, you feel empowered to like do something about it. So I think that was really one of the best benefits of working with Dr. Sarah.
I love that. What other advice might you have for someone who is looking for help, ready to try anything? You mentioned so far in this conversation, sound therapy. You mentioned getting specific guidance, actionable steps. Are there anything else or any other tips you have for our listeners here?
Yeah, I think that the main point that I'll keep coming back to and want to emphasize here is just taking care of your mental health and prioritizing that as best as you can. Of course, we're all limited in what we have access to and what we have capacity to do in our day-to-day lives. But I do feel like the component, the extent to which you really can change your relationship to your body and to the thoughts that you're having and to the sensations that you're feeling or hearing, that's going to go a long way in not just being able to like solve the problem, but also like changes your relationship with yourself, I think, in a really positive way.
I love that. Your story is inspiring. I want everyone to know about it. That's why we're doing this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube and this has been helpful, comment helpful. If you're listening on Spotify, definitely give this specific podcast episode 5 stars. Anna, I really thank you for sharing your story and being a beacon of hope for the many with tinnitus or sound sensitivity. I hope to have you back at some point or catch up soon. And thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dr. Ben, for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take care.